This homily will take us through the valley of shadow and death. And I promise not to leave us there, but to bring us out. So please take care of yourselves and yours as we journey together to the red hills of Georgia. When I was in high school, I began a journey to discover my roots, a journey that I'm almost done with, or I'm forcing myself to be done with, as I have traced my roots to the 1700s, which for an African American is hard to do. But people always ask me where I'm from. And my answer is always Rochester, New York. Then they ask me, well, where are your parents from? And I say, Georgia and South Carolina. And then I tell them before they can utter any more questions based on their assumptions of my nationality that, look, I'm 7th generation American, and I am an African American, which means that I'm a descendant of American enslaved people who were captured from the west coast of Africa in the 1700s, sold to American plantations, and that this country was built on their backs, and the backs of their labor and enslavement. Is that a good enough answer for you? You know, my mother's side of the family was from Georgia, Southwest Georgia. You know, I remember going down to my grandmother's farm with the gorgeous hills of red clay, and I was a small child. I can still smell the red clay. Joyous times there with my grandmother, who could cook. And my journey to discover the origins of that farm was less than joyous. The farm in which, as a child, the earth beneath my feet brought joy. But to my ancestors, the earth beneath them was not as joyous. However, continued hopes in my journey reminds me of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood, reconciliation, creating a beloved community. That gets difficult, especially when people ask me where I'm from. But the Reverend Victoria Safford said that the goal of the beloved community is reconciliation, not to destroy your opponent, nor cast them out, but to stay in the struggle till love wins. Reconciliation, to stay in the struggle till love wins. Almost exactly 2.5 years ago, I ventured into the lands of my late mother's family, the backwoods of Southwest Georgia, near the Alabama border, near the home of the former President Jimmy Carter, but where white supremacy has had a long, strange, unchecked career. I was very nervous and didn't know if I should fear going into an area with unpaved dirt roads and Georgia red clay. Would I know the correct mannerisms to avoid conflict? Would I be passive enough to survive my journey? So on the way there, I saw Confederate flags waving high and signs, fresh new signs, to join the sons and the daughters of the Confederacy and to honor the glorious dead, fresh new signs. However, when I got to the town, I felt different. I felt that the Black population had taken back their power and were empowered and were living in peace with their white neighbors. The stain of slavery was a distant past, and where kings dream of the sons of former slaves and slave owners was more of a dream realized than a dream deferred. But I had to cross symbols of white supremacy to get there, showing me that as far as we have come, we are far from done. Yes, we are far from done. When meeting my cousins, I heard the stories of my family, how they struggled over the many generations to build the beloved community. Many, many generations. Again, 7th generation American, right? I researched the lives of my ancestors and the community that they were allowed to create. And I listened to the stories passed down through the generations. I claim their legacies and identities. And I have learned from their struggles and their will to make the world a better place for their descendants. We are the manifestations of their dreams. We are the manifestation of their prayers. We are the manifestations of their tears. Through their lives and their experiences, it is clear that building the beloved community also involves justice and accountability. Alice Walker, the author of Color Purple, which was set in Georgia, by the way, said that only justice can stop a curse. Well, it was on one of those red hills that my great-great-grandfather, Reuben Walls, was born enslaved. My grandmother told me how when Reuben was 9 years old and was working in the fields with his twin sister, Ilse, all of the enslaved people on the Walls plantation were called to the gathering place in the middle of the slave quarters. And he was short like me. You probably can't tell, but he was short like me, and he came to the front so that he could see. And he got to the front, and when he got to the front, he saw that Boss Man Tom, is what they called him, had a whip in his hands. And little Reuben saw his mother, and she was tied to a post. Without words, the slave master proceeded to whip her and whip her and whip her until the blood ran down her back. And she died right in front of her children. You see, Red Hill's red clay had more than iron in it. You see, just last week, I discovered in the census records Boss Man Tom, or should I call him Judge Thomas Anderson Walls, and his slave plantation. I researched further and discovered the federal census schedule that recorded not the names, but the ages of Reuben and Ilse in 1860, listed as twins and 7 years old, 2 years before their mother was murdered by the hands of Judge Thomas Anderson Walls. She was my 3 times great-grandmother, and we still don't know what her name was. She was buried in an unmarked grave on the red hills of Georgia, as if she never existed. You know, when I reflect on that and I channel the spirits of my ancestors, because it bothered me, it wounded my soul, it wounded my spirit, but I began to hear my great-great-grandfather Reuben sing, Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from home. Orphaned. The women of the plantation took care of him in the slave quarters. But when the enslaved people were freed, Reuben remained on the plantation and worked that red clay. He eventually married and began a family of his own. And when Thomas Walls was nearing the end of his life without an heir, he sold the land to Reuben for a cheap price, 325 acres. Reparations, reconciliation, not quite, but it was a start. And I remember going to visit my grandmother on her farm with that red clay. And it was the same one that was paved literally with the blood, sweat, and tears of my ancestors. So today, I claim the identity of a survivor, and I claim this legacy. Because when freed, my ancestors helped to create a community, combining the old slave quarters, the old field hands into a Black community. And it was called Old Field Community. They established churches such as the Red Hill Church, with its own cemetery dating back to the 1880s, a schoolhouse on the other side of the cemetery known as the Red Hill School, where many generations of my family were educated, including my late mother. And they looked out for each other as white supremacy tried to keep them down and segregated. But they transformed that red clay into fertile soil, and our family survived, our family thrived. So I claim the identity of resilience and determination, and I claim this legacy. I claim joy of that earth that was meant for sorrow. We must now know, claim, and own the identities and the cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in this world. So today I am proud to claim the identity of a survivor. I am proud to claim the identity of determination, of resilience, of joy, because I get joy when I think about what my ancestors did for me. They stayed in the struggle to love one. And I am that love. And I am loved. And it continues to shape who I am and how I live in this world. What identities and cultural legacies will you claim today? How have they shaped who you are and will shape your relationship with the earth? I believe in King's dream of the children of former slaves and slave masters and owners sitting down together at the table of humanity. and we must know and own the fact that racism is detrimental to and counteracts the building of a beloved community and a beloved world. If only we can dismantle racism and other forms of oppression within ourselves and our institutions, then we can build the beloved community and create the world that we want instead of the one we have. Can you see a world in which all people can share in the abundance of earth and protect it for love's sake? Can you see a world where poverty, hunger, and hopelessness is not tolerated because we will not allow it? Can you see a world where all people, their uniqueness, their colors, their nationalities, their sexualities, their origins, their religious practices, their spiritualities are not eradicated, but affirmed in love? A world that has no place for racism, no place for discrimination, no place for bigotry, and no place for prejudice. A world built by the all-inclusive spirit of love and humanity. We are the dreams of the ancestors, and we have them in the palm of our hands to build a beloved community, not just within our congregations, but to spread it outward to the world. We must believe that a beloved community is possible and become the hands and feet to see to it. We must believe that joy will come in the morning after we have endured this long night of weeping. And when that sun rises, the glorious sun of justice, when that sun rises in the morning, it will rise with healing in its wings. And I cannot wait to truly unlock the creative energy of human agency to make that happen, to make the killings stop, to make the racism stop, to make oppression stop, to make hatred stop. Can I get an amen, somebody? You know what I'm saying? It is that time. It is that place to awaken the power of love within us that is way more powerful than hate. That power of love that is way more powerful than oppression, more powerful than suppression, and more powerful than supremacy. So let the power of love help us to build the beloved community, and let us all live to see that day in body and in spirit. So get to it, see to it, so that we can all heal and make and take joy from it. May it be so.